Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of our program about what your rights are if you have an accident or if you're looking for a lawyer from a personal injury claim. I am Mitchell Proner, and I am doing this work for since 1988, so it makes it over 30 years. I have lectured across the United States to attorneys and bar associations, and even in Canada and Europe. I only represent victims who've suffered injuries due to the fault of others, and that sometimes, even if fault can't be established, we also do workers' comp cases. The topic for today is, what is my case worth? What's the value? So many times clients call up, they might be represented by another law firm, and they're looking to change attorneys, and they say, my lawyer won't tell me my case value. And also, my own clients call up and they want to know, what are we going for? What are we suing for? They think that that is the paramount concern, and they want to know a number. And usually, I'm prepared to give them information to satisfy basically what it is that they're asking, what their case might be worth, what they can reasonably expect to be compensated. And a lot of times it's too soon to answer that question. And I'll explain why. Immediately after somebody is injured, the first thing they should do is get medical care. That's always more important than any money anyone is ever going to get in an accident. If anybody thinks the money is more important than their health, they're a fool. Because money somebody could have today, they could lose it tomorrow, they could be rich the day after. Your health, most people, that's what they have for life. And if you have money, doesn't mean you can buy good health. If you have your health, a lot of times you can work. If you don't have your health, all the money might not help you to be comfortable. Your health is much more important than money. But you have a lawyer for a personal injury claim, and you want to know what the case is worth. So sometimes the incident might have just occurred, and immediately after, they get in touch with a lawyer from their hospital bed, and they want to know from different lawyers. I'll talk to 3 different attorneys, and I'll let them all tell me what the case is worth. And the one that says the biggest number, I'll hire. Well, that's a really poor idea. Because just because an attorney says to you, this is a $10 million case, doesn't mean 3 years down the road, the same attorney might be saying, yeah, well, you know what? We didn't know at the time that there was going to be this problem with that case and that problem with the case. And now they've had the case 3 years, and they're trying to push you into a settlement for a much lower amount. And certainly that's not an ethical way to practice, but not every attorney is ethical. Not every architect is ethical. Not every doctor is ethical. And in any profession, you might read one day about somebody getting arrested. I tried to maintain the highest ethical standards. I was elected president of the New York State Academy of Trial Lawyers, which is the largest state trial bar in the country. And I think those thousands of attorneys wouldn't have me as their president of their bar association if I didn't have a reputation, at least for some sort of professionalism. That being said, not every attorney is the same. So why wouldn't an ethical attorney want to tell you immediately what your case is worth? Well, first of all, most cases are fluid in that the initial injuries don't determine true value. Because everybody, when they sustain injuries, go through a healing process. And while a doctor might be able to tell a patient what they could reasonably expect to encounter during the healing process, they can't be certain. Some people recover in 6 weeks, some people recover in 6 months, and some people are left with permanency. Now, some injuries immediately involve permanency. If you lose your arm, chances are you're not going to get it back, and there's permanency there. If you have a depressed skull fracture with a craniotomy where they remove a part of your skull, if you're paralyzed, if you're in a wheelchair, and I've represented people with all those catastrophic injuries, and certainly there's permanency, but even in those circumstances, how the injury occurred, often what my client tells me isn't necessarily the same story that other witnesses are going to tell. Also, there might be a limit to the insurance coverage available to pay a claim. Or it might initially appear that there's a limit in insurance coverage, and afterwards we find additional coverage. And sometimes that's as a result of good lawyering. So I'll give you a story, tragic story from years ago. I had a client in upstate Binghamton. He was on a motorcycle and a car ran a stop sign and there was a collision. The client called up his wife from the accident scene and said, "My leg's a little banged up. I called for an ambulance. I don't know what time I'm going to be home." Sadly, those were the last words his wife heard. He had a head injury and he died in the hospital. Well, we filed suit, and the driver of the other vehicle ran a stop sign. Even though it was in his neighborhood, he knew about the stop sign. He said he was in a rush and he should have saw the motorcycle. He only had a minimum policy, $25,000. And he said he didn't have any assets and he didn't have any money. He was retired, living on a pension, didn't have any savings, didn't have any money in the bank, didn't own his house, had no income, and there was only the $25,000 in coverage, and even his car wasn't worth more than a couple grand. Well, given the horrific loss of the family, I flew up to Binghamton and did a deposition. And I asked him if he belonged to any clubs, and he was a member of the American Legion. And I said, "Did he hold a position?" And he said, yes, he was the chaplain for that American Legion charter. And I said, "Where was he going when the incident occurred?" He said he was going to see a friend of his. And I asked the name. I said, "Was the friend in the American Legion?" He said, yes. And I said, "Did he hear about his friend's illness from the American Legion?" And he said he might have. And I said, "Was it his obligation as chaplain of this American Legion charter to visit ill American Legion members?" And he said, "No, that was just something he was doing on his own." Well, I subpoenaed the records for the American Legion, and it turned out he was getting reimbursed for his mileage for these trips. And I sued the American Legion, made a motion, had him declared an employee of the American Legion for the purpose of this lawsuit as a matter of law, and we found all sorts of insurance coverage. And the family got, never can it be fair compensation when you lose a member of your family, but they got much more money than they would have gotten hadn't I done my work and found the extra levels of coverage. So another attorney might have said that case only worth 25 grand because that's all there was in coverage. Another more skilled attorney would say, wait a minute, even on a minimum policy of 25,000, there's 50,000 for wrongful death. That's the minimum in New York. Then another attorney might enjoy their work like I do and seek justice for their clients and can get fair compensation. Not every case can I pull a rabbit out of a hat, but I use the story to illustrate how sometimes a case might have greater value than it initially appears. Also, sometimes people make miraculous recoveries. I remember one time a guy was, this case was in Philadelphia. A woman was a nursing student at the University of Pennsylvania. She was from Columbia, and her parents were coming to visit her from the country of Columbia. And on their way to see their daughter, there was a terrible accident, and the father sustained catastrophic injuries. And I was contacted by an attorney in New York, and I went to Philadelphia. I'm admitted in Pennsylvania, and I met with the family. They only spoke Spanish, so I was speaking to them in Spanish because I'm fluent in Spanish. And I was speaking with the mother and the daughter. And the husband was on a respirator. And the doctor came in, and he said he wanted to take the husband off the respirator, and he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to breathe on his own. And the family said, we don't understand. And I told the doctor, they don't understand. They speak Spanish. And the doctor said, well, you're translating. You're speaking Spanish. You tell them what I said. And I said, I don't think it's my role to serve as a translator for the hospital to tell them to take their father off the respirator. But at the end of the day, they took him off the respirator and he survived. 6 months later, he calls me up and he says, how are you doing? And I said to him, it's a miracle to speak with you. And he said, why? You don't think we have good phones in Colombia? And I said, no, but you were really in critical condition. They didn't know if you were going to live or not. And I said, I'm fine. And he came to my office about 6 months after that. And he picked up his check in person and he gave me some Colombian currency. And he said, I don't know how much this is worth in America, but in Colombia, you could buy a good steak with this if you ever come to the country. And he was a nice guy, and he looked fine. So sometimes people make miraculous recoveries. So sometimes you can't tell exactly what the injuries are initially. And in a personal injury case, somebody's entitled to money for past medical expenses and future medical expenses, past loss of earnings and future loss of earnings, past pain and suffering and future pain and suffering, including the loss of quality of life. And you need to have medical testimony to determine the permanency of the injuries. And that can drastically affect the value of a case. Additionally, the loss of earnings can often be determined not only by the work that somebody's doing now, but by traditional economic data in the field that they have, their career, profession, or work. And a vocational expert and an economist can give you better numbers than a lawyer off the top of their head. And that's why experienced lawyers use experts. Beyond that, for future medical care, a lawyer can use a doctor to come up with a life care plan if somebody needs ongoing medical care for their life. And these life care plans can also be sent to an economist that can take into consideration the increasing cost of medical care. And between the vocational expert and the life care plan and the economist, oftentimes a case might have a value of millions of dollars that might not be readily apparent when you're speaking to a family in a hospital. And for those reasons, a lot of times an attorney might not want to give a number based on pressure from a family and would rather ethically see how the damages reveal themselves over time with the treating physicians and the experts that the lawyer might acquire. An experienced lawyer with a great reputation might not succumb to the pressure just to say any big number to try and get a new client. I certainly will tell somebody, based upon my experience, what I think the case are worth on their face now, if they make a terrific recovery, or if it's worse. I'm familiar with values and what could be sustained in appellate divisions, but because if I go to a jury and I talk the jury into giving somebody $50 million, a lot of times my clients are so happy, and I have to tell them, don't think you're going to get that money. They're going to try and appeal. And during the appellate process, we can negotiate. Fortunately, I've had multiple multi-million dollar verdicts that have been sustained on appeal, because I do my best to have the evidence going clean when I have to try a case. But I think every client would rather have their case settled. And in negotiating a case, that's another art, because a good attorney realizes this is not about vanity. If you ask me, the last verdict I took, it was last month. If you ask me if I won, yes, I won. And you can pretty much ask me at any time and I could give you that answer. But I've lost a lot of cases too. Any attorney that says they've never lost a case doesn't try a lot of cases. If you ask me when was the last case I lost, I don't think it's been years. But I can't guarantee the result of any case. You can guarantee a settlement, because then you know what you're getting. But some cases have to be tried because they're difficult cases, and the other side doesn't want to make a reasonable offer. And then it's up to the client to either take a low offer or to have the confidence that their attorney is going to present their evidence well and go to trial and get a good result. I genuinely try to give the client the odds and the expectations and keep them reasonable. But I'm always prepared to go to trial. If the offer is low and my client doesn't want to take it, I'm ready. You can't always expect a fair offer on a case. You should be able to expect a lawyer that's prepared and can give you honest answers to your questions. If you want to consult with an attorney that's experienced and can give you straight answers, to consult with my firm is always free and confidential, and you can ask to speak directly with me, Mitchell Proner, at 1-800-321-1234. And I hope you'll follow us and get more information and know your rights. And most importantly, I wish you the best of health. And I thank you for listening.
My name is Zach Gordon. I was on my motorcycle my way home from work on the LIE when someone in a van swerved over the double-sided line of the HOV lane and hit me, and I took a pretty gnarly tumble. I ended up fracturing a bone in my wrist. I had a concussion as well as nerve damage in my right arm, but the worst injury was probably the ruptured disc I had in my neck, which ended up requiring spine surgery. I had the disc replaced and whatnot. In that meantime, I posted about the accident, letting some friends I had on Reddit know about what happened and whatnot. And a random person, reached out to me and said, I had an accident as well, and Proner and Proner really helped me out for much more minor injuries than you, so I think you'd have a good case with them. And next thing I know, I reached out to Proner and Proner and was almost immediately put in touch with Mitchell the same day. From that point forward, it was super simple. I signed the retainer, gave any medical professionals I saw my attorney's information, and I had to speak to my attorney maybe if even once a month, once every 2 months. And next thing I know, in quite literally less than a year, the case was already over with a very, very good settlement. Essentially set me up for the future, and I'm very, very grateful to Mitchell Proner and the rest of his I suppose, employees at Proner and Proner. And I would absolutely recommend this firm to anyone that has been in a similar situation or scenario as me. Or if anyone you may know, this could not have been an easier and more desirable outcome in the process.